Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host, Brett Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland. Today, I've got Robert DeLaurentis with us. Robert, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your show.
Well, it's exciting to have you. You are widely known as the Peace Pilot, an aviation circumnavigator, author, speaker, philanthropist, and Navy Gulf War veteran. Has flown over all 7 continents, both poles, and across 53 countries, carrying experiments for NASA and Scripps Institution of Oceanography while championing the global peace movement in a plane called the Citizens of the World for the World. That's pretty awesome. We're going to talk about it. But before we did all that cool stuff, what helped make you the man you are today?
What helped make me the man that I am today?
That's right.
I would say mentors and people that have guided me on these different journeys. Certainly built a team first. And that was other people that were passionate about the same goal. You know, not people that were trying to make money on the effort, but people that really believed in it. And we were doing these projects, or we do these projects because we love them. And it's easy to get excited and work extra hours and deal with things like what I refer to as a cosmic ass kicking on that polar flight. It keeps you going.
Oh, heck yeah. So talk about the two. You, I know you did one around the equator. So you literally fly in an airplane by yourself, right, around the equator. And then you did a second one. So talk about those two, and we'll go in as much detail as you want. And we'll talk about a lot of the learnings that were going on there.
Yeah, the 2015 equatorial circumnavigation, so along the equator over the populated areas of the planet, that was something that I had heard about doing many years before when I was first getting my pilot's license. And I thought, wow, that's the hardest thing I can think to do in an airplane. And I built a team of about 25 sponsors and had some supporters, some people in aviation. And that was the topic of the book called Zen Pilot, Flight of Passion and the Journey Within, and the audiobook. And probably one of the harder things I had done in my life, but we pulled it off in pretty good form. We did lots of interviews afterwards. We showcased aviation safety and technology. And then, you know, people always ask you what's next. And you know, I was thinking long and hard about that. Most people that circumnavigate do it once and they're done. I got an email from my dad. It was an article about the North and South Poles, how they were the only places on the planet where peace always existed and continues today. And I thought, wow, what would it take? Yeah, what would it take to take an airplane, a much more capable one than I used on my first trip, modify it in a way that it could handle the poles, right? Extreme temperatures, distance, loss of navigation, and just brutally difficult on an aircraft. So I started thinking about that. And one of the things that kept me going, Brett, was I couldn't stop thinking about it. You know, when you think about something, you go, oh, I'd really like to do that, but maybe it's too hard, too expensive, too dangerous. And it just would not leave my mind. So I decided that I would start chipping away at it. And on the first equatorial trip, excuse me, that was a 6-month preparation time. And that's like every day, you know, on weekends, at night, in any spare time.
What are you doing to prepare to that? Is that like mentally, physically, what is all that?
All that, really. It usually starts with a pad of yellow paper. And I just start listing all the things I need to look into. So, you know, one might be my fitness. How can I improve that? What about my eyesight? You know, can I have surgery and make my eyesight better in case I lose my glasses in some turbulence? How am I going to convince an insurance company to insure this? Where am I going to get the money, you know, to fund these things? What sponsors might I reach out to? What science will we carry with us? What things can we highlight? What will it do for aviation? Just every question, you could possibly imagine. And then you just start chipping away at them. Some of them, you can answer with a little bit of research. Some of them take some money. Other ones you just can't predict. Like, what things can I expect to happen on this trip? On the, last trip, COVID was the thing that nobody anticipated, right? And there would be no way.
Plan.
Yeah, wasn't part of the plan. And it was a big deal. So yeah, just chipping away. And the polar trip ended up taking a year and a half to plan for, and 8 months, 23 days. And I set it up differently. I would try and tackle the South Pole, which was an 18.1 hour flight and a plane designed to fly for 6 hours. So we modified the plane in over 50 ways, taking it way beyond the limits that it was designed, to handle. And it was funny because I would wake up as it got closer to the departure day with panic attacks. And I was losing my hair. I was not sleeping. Had some internal bleeding thing going on. And it was because I had made so many promises, and I was really concerned that I wasn't going to be able to meet all those expectations. Like, it's easy to talk about it. It's a whole nother thing to actually get in a plane. Yeah. It's been modified in 50 ways, fly a distance, 3 times further than it was ever designed to fly, and make it back safely, after flying in extreme cold temperatures without navigation at times. Brutal.
So talk about that. So you take off from the Pacific Northwest where you're at, and then you just fly, just start heading south, right? So just start heading south. Like how do you get there? You're filling up with gas. Like, talk about all that stuff.
Well, yeah, you actually don't head south first, because I had to go get some ferry tanks installed in Las Vegas. Then we needed to test those and see what our actual performance was, and then project it out to see if it was even possible, because you don't really know until your plane is fully outfitted what it can do. And, having problems along the way, fuel leaks, just every imaginable system that you put in there doesn't necessarily want to work with the other systems.
Right.
Eventually, though, you headed down to Texas, and, then found out that the Chilean scientific community wouldn't allow me to fly over Antarctica, just days before I left. Problems like that. And then, you continue to work on these things. We had a scientist write a letter to the Chilean scientific community, reminding them we weren't leaving anything in Antarctica, that we would share our scientific data. Could they please allow us and not require 6 more months like they had originally requested. So, all kinds of issues like that. I remember talking to a guy with the British Antarctic Survey, and I was trying to get charts of Antarctica because they're not readily available. Mm-hmm. One guy that had done it used National Geographic's map, the small ones you can buy. And then the guy from the British Antarctic Survey called me, and he said, you run the risk of prolonged suffering down there because the conditions are so harsh. And my plane wasn't tested, right? I was doing this for the first time. Couple weeks before, a Chilean C-130 went down, and all 40 some people died over the passage. And that was my first 2 hours of the flight. And they still hadn't found the bodies by the time I left. Wow. And the FAA was saying, hey, maybe you ought to reconsider, that we don't want an American down there to add to all these problems. So, it just got more and more difficult. And I saw it as a sign that maybe, this wasn't the best idea. But I'm not really one to give up either. So, I pressed ahead. And then, of course, there's a point where the mission becomes more important than you. Mm-hmm. And I write about that in the book, and certainly talk about it a lot in the movie too. So
what happens? You go over Antarctica, the South Pole, right? And then what? Then what happens as we continue to go over that?
Well, first of all, you burn more than half your fuel to get there. because the plane's extra heavy, right? And you're counting on the weather to push you along because the plane doesn't theoretically have the range to make it that far, right? So you're taking off with not enough fuel. You lose navigation over the South Pole. You pray to God that your fuel doesn't gel, because the gelling temperature of Jet A1 is much, basically it's minus 47 degrees Celsius, and you'll be flying in minus 60 Celsius. So 13 degrees colder than what your fuel can handle. So I'm heating the fuel inside the cabin of the plane before I'm pushing it out along the wing route into a fuel pump, a heat exchanger, and eventually into the engines. But again, I hadn't tested that completely.
All homemade.
Yeah, pretty much. Sure. Tanks were made and, inspected by the FAA, but
sure,
there's a big difference between, we inspected this, we think it's going to work, now go try it. Right?
Yeah. Have at it, buddy. Good luck.
So anyway, it was funny because as I got close to the South Pole and I started losing my navigation, then you're dead reckoning, which is kind of what sailboats do, right? You point it on a course and you just keep going. And I'm talking to the South Pole, a guy named Corey, and he's, thanking me for my efforts, and I'm thanking him for living at the South Pole and carrying out all these experiments. And it was funny because I was counting down as I got close to flying overhead, and 10, 9, 8, and then I said permission to overfly, and he said negative Ghost Rider, and I'm like, wow, from Top Gun,
Yeah.
I start laughing and he starts laughing. And I was thinking, we're both over the South Pole. Neither one of us is going to see the new episode of, Top Gun anytime soon. So, there was humor there and a human connection as well in the most remote part of the planet. So, yeah, that was awesome. And then I was going to do 3 laps around the pole, one for the people, one for the planet, and one for the plane. And after 2, I thought, this is nonsense. I don't have as much fuel as I'd like. So I headed back, and I thought I had made it, like the rest of this is going to be easy. But I started to lose that push from behind with the wind. And it seemed to happen right over the Drake Passage, which is where more ships have gone down than anywhere on the planet. And I'm recalculating, do I have enough fuel left as the wind keeps dropping, the push from behind drops off. And then I got to the point where I was not sure. And I thought, oh my God, close to 8 hours flight time, I'm going to go in the drink, and this is frigid, icy waters. I ended up landing with about 15 minutes of fuel on a 18.1 hour flight. So again, terrifying.
Where do you land at? Where are you landing at with 15 minutes of fuel left? Where's that at?
Ushuaia International Airport.
And where's that?
In Argentina, the tip.
Okay.
Southern tip. And that's where I took off from. But although since I'm coming back in less than 24 hours, I'm breaking one of the international rules, which is you can't leave and go back into a country in the same 24 hours. So, that was a concern. I landed and, exhausted because I had been up for about over 30 hours at that point, prepping, leaving late and all that. And they wanted me to move the plane to the terminal. I knew where they would eventually put me. So I just pulled in there and they're screaming at me on the tower radio. And I just shut the radio off. And, they send the police over to arrest me and hands on their guns and stuff like that. So There was no shortage of, excitement or drama. And it was funny because I joked that was the hardest part of the trip and the rest would be a global victory flight. Well, there was nothing further from the truth because it turned out to be a global ass kicking because, it's just one thing after another. It felt like suffering. And the funny thing about the trip is that part of the reason I did it was to highlight the similarities amongst people and living things. And one of the things is that all living things suffer. And, there I was joining the group with this self-inflicted suffering, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So then the police take you?
Yeah. They took me. The guy, his name was Mig. He had his hand on his gun, and I opened up the hatch, and I had my survival suit on. There was wires and cables for communication and stuff, and I'm looking at him, and he's looking at me. It's kind of like a little standoff, and he puts his finger up and points to one of the engines, and he said, "I used to fly one of these planes." And I just took this deep sigh of relief. I thought,
He's
I'm not
get it.
He's going to give me a break here. And as we walked back to the terminal, with the police escort, or as I walked back, it was funny because the cinematographer was perched up on a staircase overlooking a barbed wire fence. And he yells out, I hear somebody go, "Robert." And I turn and I look, and he's got his hand up in the air, and he goes, "Yes." And I returned it, and of course he got that on film. So
that's great.
Pretty exciting moment, tremendous relief.
Yeah. So you get done with that, you get the cops to let you go, then you get back in the airplane. Now what?
Then it's time to head towards the North Pole. And, through South America, Rio, Falkland Islands, then up through the Middle East and into Europe. And then I'm stuck because of COVID. And I'm stuck in Spain in a place called Sitges. All the tourists had been sent home. And a mentor of mine, I'm talking to her when everybody's leaving the country. And she said, Robert, it would be easy to come back to the United States, but you would be abandoning your mission and the plane. And you're just going to come back to an earlier phase of COVID because it started, over in Europe. So I decided to stay, and I was by myself, didn't really speak Spanish, and was waiting for the weather to change at the North Pole, because you have to wait 6 months, right, for the temperature in the south to switch to the north. And as I looked for a place to stay, since the hotels were shutting down, had some good fortune, made friends with a police officer who helped me find a place to stay. And surprisingly, the place was called the Zen Villa. And I saw that in the paper, and I thought, well, I have this book, Zen Pilot, Flight of Passion and the Journey Within. And before I was the Peace Pilot, I was the Zen Pilot. So I ended up renting that place. And again, more good luck. The people knew they weren't going to rent it during COVID, and they were asking like $6,000 a month. And I said, it's just me. I've got a budget of $1,500 a month. Will you take it? And they did. Wow. So, again, I got lucky, but this was also a very beautiful place on top of a mountaintop overlooking the port city of Sitges, which is spectacular. So very fortunate.
Incredible. And then you go after the weather changes and maybe COVID is what COVID was at that time. You get to the North Pole.
Right. I get to the North Pole and I lose my GPS. And I didn't have it for 5 hours on that flight. And we eventually found out that at that part of the planet, all that there really is, at least for my plane, was Russian GLONASS satellites. And the equipment in my panel was set up only to look at US satellites. So I ended up using an iPad, an Apple iPad, to navigate. And if you look at the track for that transition over the three North Poles, the North Pole of inaccessibility, the magnetic, and the true North Pole, you see the plane on this sort of wavy track. I was basically lost, right? At 30,000 feet, which was a wrong way altitude for the direction I was going, no comms, and GPS failing me. And I thought the North Pole would be easier because it was more traveled. But in my case, I had this equipment that was failing me. And they said it had to do with the angle of the satellites, also with the Earth. I don't know that we ever truly understood why it went out for so long. But yeah, terrifying, right? Over the North Pole.
I was going to say, how are the anxiety attacks there? Because we can tie all this back. I mean, the point of telling this story is right? The perseverance, the dedication, the purpose, the mission. For people listening to this, that's your business, right? So you may not be flying to the North Pole or the South Pole, but you get your business with all those things. And so what did you do to calm your mind, calm yourself, believe in yourself, and have faith?
Yeah, let me just say one thing, Brett. It wasn't really my business. It was my passion, because my business is real estate, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm saying it's people, though, that are listening to this, they can make your flight be their business, whatever their business is, right? You got to have all those things, dedication and perseverance and so on.
Yeah, I think having, faith in what you're doing, like knowing it's the right thing for you. And that's a place you have to get to, right? If you're doing something and you're not happy, and in my mind, it's got to have some sort of noble purpose. Like everybody's got to win, right? It can't just be all about you. And for me, it was, the science would move humanity ahead. The 95 sponsors that I had would all benefit from demonstrating their equipment worked. There was the inspiration part for the kids, and for me, setting some records. So, a lot of people were winning on this trip. And I was 100% committed, right? I knew I wasn't going to give up. And like I said, there was a point actually in Dakar, Senegal, where the mission became more important than me. So I was going to complete this no matter what.
Yeah. Talk about that when you say what science needed. Like, how does science get something out of you going to the North Pole and the South Pole?
Yeah, that was probably one of the biggest parts of this trip. We had multiple scientific experiments on board the Citizen of the World. One of them was a NASA wafer scale spaceship, and it's about that big. And it's at DeLaurentis.
So those listening, it's about the size of a softball is what he held up.
Yeah, but flat. It's a circuit board, basically.
Okay.
And what NASA determined was that rockets with astronauts and rocket motors and thousands of gallons of fuel were a thing of the past. And their hope was to take these wafer scale spaceships, blast them out into space using an electromagnetic cannon, and then using lasers to push it even further. And you could launch them every 15 minutes. And my particular model, which was a very early model, collected mostly data. It took 8,000 pictures. It measured temperature, altitude, speed, location. So that was one experiment. Then we were collecting plastic particles over the poles. I did that with two-sided tape. What we found was that there was more microfibers over the poles than there was along the equator, which is where all the population is. So the winds on the planet grab those fibers and it create a sort of an island in the sky, much like the plastic islands in the ocean. So I think that will at some point get a Nobel Prize for the scientists that were involved with that. Also used biofuels for the first time over the poles.
Sorry to interrupt you. Talk more about that. So a guy like me that doesn't understand that, maybe our listeners understand it. So when you say there's plastics up there, and I'm assuming I'm picturing tape on your airplane that's flying through, collecting the particles or the plastics, then you get back, they take the tape, and then they go do whatever they go do with it. So is that correct?
Right. So most clothing has some amount of like polyester or plastics in it.
Yeah.
Unless you just iron your shirt before the show, I'm guessing there's a little bit in that too. So they shed plastic, and it's so fine that it's floating around in the air. And then we inhale it. We have it in our lungs. It's basically been proven that there's plastic in every body of water on the planet. So they're trying to figure out, how did the plastic get there? And the explanation that we helped create is that it's carried in these wind currents, right, or in the air. So you would expect to see, though, more plastic in the air over the populated parts of the planet. But that's not the case. There was more over the North and South poles. So, and, an island of plastic that we potentially breathe. So I think it's more important than the plastics in the ocean, because we're not drinking the ocean water and getting plastic in us, but we are breathing the plastic particles with every breath.
Yeah.
So really,
that's fascinating, man.
Really cool stuff. Then I mentioned also the biofuels. right? We used biofuels over the North and South Poles. And then there was a tracking device called ADSB, Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast. And with that, they track the aircraft, and we have, the visuals for that in the movie all the way around the planet. So there's no part of the planet now that they can't track you or an aircraft.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Talk about the movie. Where's that at?
That's on Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and Google TV. It took us 4 years to film that. We started with 72 days of high resolution footage and edited it down to an hour and 52 minutes. Very proud of that. Jeremy Lazelle was the cinematographer. He worked for National Geographic, Animal Planet, Discovery, and did a fantastic job. He was moving from place to place as I flew and met me at probably, 60% of the different stops along the way.
There it is. I just pulled it up.
That's it. And the premise behind it was peace had always existed at the North and South Poles. So by connecting those two and everybody in between, we were, doing something positive for the planet. And in the documentary or the movie, we asked people, what does it mean to be a citizen of the world, which is the name of the aircraft, and how do you find peace in your world? And what you find from all these different people that we interviewed was that people are very, very similar. It doesn't matter what the color of their skin is, what their ethnicity, what their financial situation is. They all want the same thing. They want joy and happiness, safety, health for their families, financial security, and they want to just live their lives.
Yeah, leave me alone, right?
Let me live my life and don't complicate it with these other things. It was also cool to be able to go out in the world and see for myself, what was happening rather than just getting the information on a computer, right? Mm-hmm. Nowadays, it's driven by AI. So somebody else is making that decision for us.
Talk about whether it's, legacy driven, if it's mission driven, purpose driven, whatever you want to call it, right? I'm a huge believer in that. And for me, it's living and helping people achieve a future greater than your past. That's what this F greater than P is. And that's my mission. And it's what we get to do every single day at Visionary Wealth Advisors. And through this podcast is helping people do that. Why is that so important? And if somebody's listening to this and they don't really know what their purpose, mission, legacy is, what advice would you have for them?
I would advise silence. A lot of people will put a lot of energy into trying to figure this out. Like this weekend, I'm going to put all my energy into figuring out what I'm supposed to do next. What if you just put your energy into listening and hearing and interpreting the information that you're getting? Would you get clear on maybe what your purpose is? And I was always 100% clear that I was meant to do this trip. No matter what obstacle came along, I was going to proceed, and there was no doubt in my mind. So I think you have to start your process, whether it be your business career or, in my case, sort of legacy building at this point, and be really clear on where you want to go. Because if you're 10 degrees off at the start, you're going to be quite a distance off in the end. Yeah. And I don't believe that we have success in the world just because we're great, or nice or friendly people. I think it's the universe giving us this opportunity to do something bigger. And I retired at 43, originally at 37, and I thought that's too early. I need to go back and work some more. But when I got out of the work world at age 43, I was so thankful for what I had in my life, the real estate that I had accumulated, and I thought it's time to give back, right? And that old saying, if you want more, give more. Yep. I think that's very, very true. And intuitively you say, no, I need to keep this stuff for myself. But the more people you help, I think the better your life gets. Yeah. And it comes back in different forms, certainly sleep better. But, this noble purpose, doing something to help the world, why wouldn't all these forces get behind you and support you? So at this point in my life, we're just trying to have the most impact we can on the planet. And because I like flying and spirituality and business, we're using those to guide us. So it makes sense that we would do an aviation movie or an international airport or books on these topics, kids' books we do as well. So, yeah, I think it's the point, if you're blessed enough, then you give back. And it doesn't always have to be this big. You could just have an impact on somebody's life, right?
Yeah, it doesn't even always have to be financially either.
No. I had a buddy, he was a doctor, and he was saying, Robert, this is great, all this stuff you're doing, you're running around the world. But he said, speaking about himself, I'm never going to be a Martin Luther. And I said, well, maybe you can inspire 10 Martin Luthers, right? By your example, by what you do in life, the decisions you make. And then there was, that got him thinking. So everybody has their unique way to give back. In your case, you're doing a podcast and you're talking to people that have had some good experiences in life, and there's a lot of people listening, and they get inspired and they do good, and it's just sort of multiplied out. So right. The leverage, that you're achieving is pretty fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Talk about the fears, and again, tie this back to somebody's business or their life. We talk about this. I ask the question all the time: how many of the fears you put in your mind ever blow up to the magnitude you put them in your mind to be? Right.
Well, I think the fear is a really critical piece of this. And what I realized early on is that you got to figure out whose fear it is, right? Because people will come up to you and say stuff like, on my first, or actually on the second trip, I had a girlfriend come up to me and said, Robert, I had a dream that you died a terrible death alone in the middle of the ocean. My dad said, you're just going to get yourself killed. My best buddy said, why don't you wait till you can afford a bigger, better plane? That was their fear, not mine. What my fear was that I was going to be out in the middle of the ocean looking for a runway on an island, and it would be night, it would be fogged in, I'd be low on fuel, and there'd be mountains around. So those were the fears that were playing through my mind. And what I did is I went up to Lake Tahoe, and at night during bad weather, I did practice approaches into Truckee Airport. So I had the mountains, the night, the weather. It wasn't an island, but it could be, right? And I practiced until I could nail it every time. And that wasn't going to be the end of it, because you will be tested. And I was tested going into American Samoa, where some other people that had flown there before me had died and crashed in the ocean. So it was a high risk deal. And I was thinking, man, I could be back in San Diego on my sofa with my girlfriend watching Netflix, but instead I'm by myself, over the Pacific Ocean. This was on the first trip. And, I closed my eyes and I opened them, and it was the same amount of darkness, right? Wow. Looking out the window. So another terrifying moment, but overcoming that fear and confronting it is critical. And when the fear comes in, I like to say it's like somebody knocking on the door, right? Maybe it's the postman. He's got a special delivery letter for you. Yeah. He's not going to stop until he delivers the package, right? Assuming, everybody's not on strike or something. Right. And it's the same thing with fear. It's got a message that it's trying to tell you, right? Hey, you're not ready for this. You need to prepare. Maybe your plane needs this extra system. Maybe you need to study this. But fear is telling you a message. And rather than hide from it, it's best to confront it, experience it completely, right? It's going to be, you're going to feel it in your body. Maybe you're going to sweat. You're going to be nervous. You're going to go, oh my God. But once you've received that message, I found it goes away. Mm. So, people say, well, weren't you afraid in the plane when you were doing all these things? And I said, yeah, I was terrified. But you can't be afraid forever. You recognize and you say, well, these are the things I need to do. And there's this risk, but I've mitigated that. So I've received the message.
Yeah. Don't you think that goes back to comfort zone though too, right? Because there's things I know I've experienced it in business, and whether it's public speaking or whatever it may be, taking risk in business, it's like once you've been there, your comfort zone may be the size of a golf ball, and then it's a baseball, then a softball, right? And then whatever, basketball, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The more we face our fears head on, the better it gets. But a lot of people, I think it's your comfort zone. It's like, I think I'm going to stay over here where it's 72 and sunny and not face that fear. But then their comfort zone never gets bigger, right?
Yeah, it's about pushing your limits. That's what I hear you saying, and I agree with that. So as a pilot, maybe, the first, when you first learn to fly, you're in sunny weather. And then maybe it's a little bit cloudy. And then maybe it's a little bit rainy. And then as an instrument pilot, you're flying in zero visibility on instruments. So I like to think that I push myself just a little bit every time I do something like that. And I experienced that in business too, right? When I was first buying real estate, they were single family houses, and then they were apartment buildings with, a few units, or a house with granny flats. And then eventually I was buying bigger apartment buildings. So yeah, you just keep pushing the envelope a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe that you put everything at risk, right? You would just take a little more of a chance. And maybe, you're mitigating the risk. Maybe somebody's guiding you. I'm a really, really big believer in mentors. And, even the kings had oracles, right? And presidents have advisors, that sort of thing. So I don't think these impossible challenges have to be always done by yourself. You can get the guidance and the wisdom from other people.
Amen to that. Talk about visualization. Again, flying an airplane up to the North Pole, or just visualizing for your life and for your business. How important is that? That's critical. And I would say, when I was waking up in the middle of the night, part of the problem was I was visualizing stuff and I didn't really have it figured out yet. So that was part of it. I did go through, and for 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after passing over the South Pole, I basically wrote out what I was doing every minute, right? So I'm switching from regular fuels to biofuels. I'm shutting one GPS unit off, so if I lose one, I can restart one very quickly. I'm taking a line of position on the sun at this point, and I'm calculating the reciprocal course. The sun was here, when I was going, and it'll be over here on the way back. So laying it out minute by minute, instant by instant is not a bad way to do it as well. And I would, again, try and bring up the fear and go deeper into it. I'm going to be afraid that I'm running low on fuel because I've just burned more than half of it to get here. How does that feel? I'd think about that and feel it through my body, and then it would go away. What more can I do to improve my chances? In my case, for example, I found the designer of the wing on the plane that I was flying. He worked for Gulfstream many years ago, and he was retired. He was a consultant. He was in his 90s. And I called him up and I said, hey, I need you to do a feasibility study on this wing to tell me how much we can load it up. And he said, well, I'm retiring next week. And I go, well, I need you to do one more project. And he was a cool guy, and he did it. And he told me to the gallon how much fuel I could carry. So that was real helpful in dealing with some of the fear too. I had done all those extra steps. Well, it makes me think of, like, again, as a business leader, the delegation and the trust factor. So we can't do it all. If you want to grow a big business, or you want to do it, you cannot be the only man or woman that figures it out. You got to be able to have a team of people around you, right? You got to call that guy that get the answer within the gallon. And sometimes you just got to have trust and faith. The guy knows what the hell he's talking about, and then trust it, build it, let's go, right? Instead of overanalyzing everything. So when you hear that, what comes to mind?
I think about a brilliant engineer. The guy's name, Robert Morgan. He worked for Scaled Composites. And when I did my test flights at Mojave, where a lot of the great planes have been tested, I wrote out all the information, the performance data, and I handed it to him. And I remember him looking at it kind of like he was looking at some essay that some third grader had written, and kind of like shrugging his shoulders, like, "Are you serious?" And he took the information home, and he came back and he said, "You can make it to the South Pole and back. In fact, you can carry less fuel than you thought you needed." So, one, to get a person of that quality and caliber on board, they've got to believe in you too, right? It's a two-way street. And he believed in me. I think he trusted that I wasn't going to waste his time or misuse his information or, do this for the wrong reasons. And if you can convince them that you're a person that's, again, has a noble cause, then I think you're going to attract those people. They like having, in some ways, a leader, someone who's willing to take chances, and they want to be part of that. We feel that a lot with the airport. There's some really tremendously capable people that have skills that I don't, and they're equally as excited as I am every time they go to the property. So.
Love it. Talk a little bit about your books, and we talked about the movie, The Peace Pilot, on Apple TV and Prime. But talk about your books and where do people find them?
You can find the books on Amazon, and if you go to peacepilotthemovie.com, you'll see all the different links for that. And we've, Brett, been talking about passion and drive and daring and all these things. In that movie, Peace Pilot, it will scare you. I think it will make you laugh. It will get you thinking that you can do almost anything. And maybe you'll think how crazy this guy is that's even attempting it. But I think we've captured the essence of this mission and what our foundation stands for. I think it's a truly entertaining movie, and we're very, very proud of the legacy piece of this and that it'll be around for a long time. And so happy that you're helping us to share it. And we believe that it's certainly going to have some impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know what I'm doing tonight. We have no sporting events. We got practice that'll be done at an early time. So hopefully my boys are up for it. My wife's up for it. We're going to watch a little movie tonight.
Excellent.
I look forward to it. Yeah, absolutely. I'll shoot you a message when I'm done. Well, Robert, man, it's been awesome having you. What a story. I mean, that's been one of the blessings. You're my 460th interview. And I think of people like yourself. I think of a gentleman I had on that is blind, and he climbed Mount Everest and kayaked the Grand Canyon. And, it's just amazing, the people that are out there in this world. And I think, kudos to people like you that you want to come on these podcasts and educate people and make an impact in the world. And we just need more of that versus all the other nonsense that goes on. So thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for sharing in the excitement and the passion of the project. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. We look forward to getting this out soon, Robert. Thanks so much. Hang with us.
Okay, thank you.